everyone. This is the Crime Cafe, your podcasting source of great crime, suspense, and thriller writing. I'm your host, Debbie Mack. Before I bring on my guest, I'll just remind you that the Crime Cafe has 2 ebooks for sale, the 9-book box set and the short story anthology. You can find the buy links for both on my website, debbiemack.com, under the Crime Cafe link. You can also get a free copy of either book if you become a Patreon supporter. You'll get that and much more if you support the podcast on Patreon, along with our eternal gratitude for doing so. I would also like to recommend Stitcher Premium if you're a fan of podcasts. If you like true crime or crime fiction, there are loads of podcasts out there for you. And with Stitcher Premium, you can listen to the exclusive archives from Criminology or bonus episodes from True Crime Garage. You can also listen ad-free to episodes of your favorite podcasts. I've subscribed, and for only $4.99 a month, it's nice to have ad-free entertainment. Just go to stitcher.com/premium and use the promo code CRIMECAFE, that's one word, all caps, to try it out. Absolutely free for a month. Hi, everyone. Our guest today is the author of the Urban Nights thriller series. He's served as an Air Force officer on active duty and in the reserves for more than 10 years. He also does his share of cool traveling to places like London, Toronto, the Arctic Circle, and the Caribbean. He also hails from the Motor City, Detroit. My guest today is James Roby. Hi, James.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I am outstanding. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent, excellent, good. So, how did you get involved in fiction writing? What got you started with that?
Well, honestly, it's been almost like a lifelong thing. I remember my father liking, old Humphrey Bogart type movies and the crime thrillers and noir and that kind of thing. And I kind of picked that up from him. And then as I got older, I started looking at things like James Bond, and then later I started seeing like Chef, and all those things kind of molded together in my mind to this character I eventually created. But I remember distinctly, and I'm dating myself, going to see Superman with Christopher Reeves, and just being so moved by that. I was a little kid, but it was like this is a story that I wish I was in. So I started writing a character that was Superman, but it was my background. And then from there, I started writing some other things. I did a book for a friend of mine who's big into Star Trek, so I did like the history of the Enterprise, and he really liked that. And then finally, I wrote a. I'm sorry, I have to admit it, a fan fiction for a TV show I was watching, and then from there, I was watching this show, another show from my past, Mike Hammer with Stacy Keach,
Oh, yes.
and I really liked that show, and all those things just kind of clicked together, I've been doing it ever since.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea you wrote fan fiction. I think that's so
I did
cool.
one. I did one.
One. Okay. I think that's awesome. I think
Thank
that's
you.
really awesome. So the Urban Nights series has a protagonist who's a former operative of the Defense Intelligence Agency. That's a really interesting sort of background for a private eye to come from.
Well, he started off. He pretty much mirrored my background until I always figured he's me except cooler. And Jordan Noble started off as a missile launch officer at Minot like I did, but he had an event in his life that changed his trajectory. And I started off with the OSI, which is the Office of Special Investigation for the Air Force. It's kind of like the Air Force's FBI, but I wanted to make it a little bit more jazzy, a little cooler, not so commonplace. So I'm looking at, first place is obviously the CIA, but man, everybody's either ex-CIA or CIA. And at the time when I thought up the using the DIA, it wasn't quite as well known in fiction. I mean, there are some characters, of Denzel Washington's portrayal of the Equalizers from the DIA, but this was before that. So I thought that that was interesting because it still connected the military background of Jordan, and it was a real life agency that not too many people had heard of.
I was going to say, did you have to do research to find out about that, or was that from experience with
No,
them?
no, that was all research. It was like I said, it started off with the CIA, but that's just so trope. Everyone just pulls the CIA in there. So I started looking up other agencies and then seeing how the CIA. I mean, the DIA does have officers and enlisted members, but they do mostly use civilians. But I thought, yeah, we could still put Jordan in there as an officer, so that still works.
I think that's really cool. I think it's cool that you're exploring a unique agency rather than going to the kind of
Oh
almost
yeah,
cliche
yeah.
CIA at this
You,
point.
you get to that point where you go to the back of the book and you flip it over and it either says ex CIA, you know, Joe
Or
Tough Guy, or
MI6.
or MI6 or ex Navy SEAL. It's like, oh
That
gosh, let's make it a little different.
Yeah, yeah, I like that a lot. How many books are there in the series so far?
So I'm working on the sixth book. But there are five books that are complete, and the other ones are getting going through the editing phase right now, and I'm already working on the seventh book. So it's an ongoing series, but they're individually, so you could jump in at any point and not be lost. You don't necessarily have to read the previous one. But yeah, right now I'm working on the seventh one, and the sixth one is in pre-production, as it were.
That's cool. I was going to say you use the term pre-production. I like that because there is almost a cinematic quality to the writing itself.
Yes, I think one of the things, and this is one of the challenges I found on one of the things that I had to adapt my approach to, is that the writing part is, I think everyone has a story in them, whether it's a fictional story or something about their life, but translating that to page is a skill, and then taking that product and then making it presentable to the public, that's an entirely different skill, and that's been a challenge for me. Getting those eyes on page, as it were, is getting people to acknowledge your work, or just be aware of it. That's quite a challenge, and there's a lot of agencies out there. There's a lot of individuals out there who have. I'm helping other writers. There's lots of programs out there that I've taken part of. There's organizations on Facebook where people are helping each other. So yeah, there is. It's not just okay. I'm the end. I'm done. I mean, there is that kind of like, okay, now we got to go into, I guess would be like the publication or the marketing part of your book, and then from there, you actually get some sales. So that's where I am now, and you know. To that end, I'm talking to people like you, Debbie, to get your readers involved, get their eyeballs on my product, and possibly expand from there.
Yeah, it's tough now. It's
Yeah, it
very
is.
hard to get visibility at all these days because there are so many books out there and there's so much to struggle with in terms of getting that visibility. But do you have a plan in terms of how many you would ultimately like to write for the series, or are you just taking it book by book?
Well, yes, I mean, it's one of those kind of things where it's like, he- the character will eventually hit a point where it's like, okay, he's just doing the same thing over and over again. And right now, the Jordan Noble and his team has gone through some changes. There's some new characters being added. He's had some personal life change in his life, so that opens opportunity for another chapter. But then it's like, okay, what happens after that? And then you're right, I don't want to be where it's just endless books. A lot of it's going to have to depend on how successful the marketing is and how successful people respond to it, and what there's demand in. I mean, they even killed off Sherlock Holmes, and the demand for him to come back was so great that I didn't really die off that cliff. It was, I just tricked you, Watson. So
Yeah.
at this point in the career, it's just like I have some stories in mind, and if there was still demand, then we would press on.
Hmm. How would you describe your books in terms of genre? Thriller, action adventure?
Um, a thriller, action, adventure, yes, all that stuff. I mean, basically, this is a detective type of novel. If you know something along the lines of movies like I already mentioned Shaft. There's some James Bond element given his former spy background. I'm thinking of stuff like 21 Bridges, the recent movie. Uh, it's an action movie with an action book with the thriller aspect of it is that ticking clock that things are what's going to happen next. So yeah, but it would definitely be that kind of feel to it if it was a movie. So
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood, if you're listening, that's what I'm going for. Michael B. Jordan, maybe we can talk and we can get a contract going.
Excellent. Let's see. Have you ever thought about writing another series or a standalone?
I have. There's a story in my head, and sometimes and that's kind of how it happens. I have a story about a guardian angel who's on Earth, and instead of having flowing wings and a flaming sword, he's more of a normal kind of person, and then it's got a more of a supernatural feel to it. I've been thinking about doing a children's book now that of a father, but as of right now, I mean, Jordan Noble and the Urbanites are like, they're like books are like your children, and they're my babies, and I'm really just trying to get to a position where I can get that eyeballs on the page, that notoriety, that people know who I am, that I can branch out. I mean, this would be something that if it didn't work, that would really crush me as opposed to if I wrote these other books and it didn't work, be like, well, at least I tried. I mean, this Jordan Noble and his Urbanites are what got me into writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What kind of a person is Jordan Noble?
Well, he is what I would call a typical hero, where he is a normal guy who's in extraordinary certain circumstances. I mean, from his beginning, he's just doing his job. He's like I said, he's a missile launch officer in Minot, North Dakota, and something incredible happens and it pulls him in. So he leaves the service to return home because his focus is on home and friends and that kind of service, and he looks at himself as I can do some about some of the problems that are facing Detroit. Most people don't, but I'm in a position to do that. And he surrounds himself with his personal friends, that all the urbanites are friends he grew up with. They don't have the same skill sets as he does. They bring other things to the mix, and together it's more like many hands make light work. And that's the kind of person Jordan is. He's not a glory hound. He's just really, I want to help people, and I have this kind of skill set. He doesn't take himself too seriously, but in hindsight, he's a pretty dangerous person. He has a unique capabilities and abilities that most people don't have, and he's aware of that, but he doesn't let it go to his head.
Always a good thing.
He's a regular guy. He's a regular guy.
A regular guy doing extraordinary
He's doing
things in
extraordinary
extraordinary
things and
circumstances.
exactly, and I think that's really the definition of a hero. He's not looking for these things, but he's really in a position like if I can help, I will.
That's so funny. It reminds me just a little bit of Walter Mosley and Easy Rollins, the
Yeah,
reluctant detective.
yeah, and he's not so much a reluctant detective. Easy's more like, I gotta eat, so
Yeah, yeah.
I gotta do this thing. But Jordan goes into it knowing that, you know, it's probably going to be dangerous, but I have the capability of dealing with that. But he doesn't sing his own praises. He works he
Mm-hmm.
he works with people. There if there's a mouse in his life, kind of like Easy's in his earlier books. It's a joint cooperation that we're going to do something better for people who can't help themselves.
Mm-hmm. So there are, in a sense, social issues addressed in your books as well as the action.
That to a degree, and I've tried to stay away from any kind of politics
Mm-hmm.
or anything that it is taking place in the city of Detroit, which has a depressed economy for quite a long time. It's a uh, still to this day overwhelmingly African American population. So some of those issues do come in play, but it's not a. And then you can see my dog's head popping up every once in a while.
Oh.
It is not a social media, social awareness kind of platform. There is a moment in one of the books, Pale Horse, where there is a terrorist attack going on in the city, and Jordan has to team up with one of his own old friends, and they have very different backgrounds, and they have a moment of, well, why is this so important? You know, why what's the issues with Detroit? Why do you feel like these things are happening? And Jordan gets heated, and they go back and forth. But in a few minutes, since they're old buddies, they they're laughing and joking there, and that's as deep as I get with it. You know, there is a touch of gentrification that's going on in Detroit right now that I address in the book. For the most part, it's criminals and crimes at a high enough level that anybody can look and say, oh yeah, that's a bad guy. You know,
Hmm. So it's layered in there,
it's
but
layered in there.
it's
Yeah.
not too thick.
Jordan doesn't live in a bubble where everything is. He's not a superhero where it's a four color world and there's good guys and bad guys. You know, there's ways there's strata in between there. There is some political thing, but again, he's a regular Joe. You know, he's just happens to be in this situation, so he doesn't get too immersed into that world.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. Being that you're from the Motor City, what's your favorite band? I just have to ask because I love music. I'm a musician.
Well, you know what? If you come to Detroit, you're gonna hear Motown. And if you come to Detroit, you gotta go to Motown. They've recently renovated, and it's gorgeous. They have a very great um, movie at the beginning, and they've redone the whole house to make it look like the way it did back in the '60s. So that Motown sound is very much alive there. You go outside, there's a DJ playing, and there's little kids and people dancing the Motown song. It's great. It's
That's so
beautiful. I just
cool.
that's my plug for Detroit. But as far as band, I mean, really, I have and I've gotten to a point where all of my bands are behind me. There was I'm a really big jazz fan, and my favorite jazz artist would be probably be either Miles Davis or Ronnie Jordan. He's a jazz guitarist from England. He died a few years ago, but I really liked his stuff. Um, from Detroit, there was an era called the techno music era, and my favorite band from that era will probably be Inner City. Um,
Hmm.
but you know, my music is everywhere. One of my favorite artists is Frankie Beverly and Mays. So yeah, but I'm a jazz guy at heart.
Very cool. I've always liked Charlie Parker, actually.
Oh, Charlie Parker. Yeah, Charlie Parker. I go on YouTube. I just type in Charlie Parker and I'm ready to go. So
I know what you mean.
and then that whole bebop era is just it's just really kind of it's good for music when you're playing because it's not very jarring and everything. It's just very smooth and you can listen to it and I just play it all the time.
I think it's really accessible too for people
Yeah.
who are not familiar with jazz. It kind of slowly introduces you to what comes next, if you know what I mean.
And it lends itself to like movie soundtracks. There's a lot of jazz artists. What's his name? Stanley Clark used to do a lot of movie soundtracks. So it kind of just lends itself into that music. It's in the background. You hear it, but it's not overpowering.
Mm-hmm. What writers do you find most inspiring?
Um, I I used to, and it was almost a law that you had to read Tom Clancy when I was in the service. I mean, when I was in at Minot, we went out to the launch control facility. They're underground, and I could tell you about it, but I had to kill you. But anyway, in every one, somewhere in the racks, there was a Hunt for Red October, a Clear Present Danger, something like that. I really enjoyed those. And that's what use for some of. I mean, his level of detail, and this is he's famously known for this. It's just incredible for someone who's never actually served, and so that was really good. Some of the people who follow him, I like Mark Gurley. He's writing the Gray Man series, and which is recently becoming a movie. So that's been really great. Great. You mentioned Walter Mosley. I
Mhm.
definitely enjoy some of his earlier stuff. I kind of drifted away from it as some of these other stuff came up, but I as far as the kind of stuff that's influenced me, and of course you can't say anything without mentioning Ian Fleming. I mean, his work is very different from the Bond on the screen, and a lot of people,
Mhm.
make that distinction very well. And it's the kind of thing that his Bond was very much a product of 1950 England, hard drinking, womanizing, even slightly racist. But at that time it was very like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's saying anything. He's doing these things. But it's different from modern writing. But I like to go back to it. And then the guy who replaced him, Raymond Benson, he was my James Bond writer. He started writing by about the same time I came into the service. Um, his Bond always appeared in my mind as Pierce Brosnan. So
Hmm.
those are the kind of guys who kind of dipped and dabbed into my writing style.
Interesting. What advice would you give to anyone who's interested in writing and publishing today?
Oh my gosh! Woo. First of all, don't do what I did, and I say that tongue in cheek, but I look back and on my career, as it were, and said I could have did one things better. And the first thing I got to say, and this is going to sound cheesy, but it's very true, is that you have got to believe wholeheartedly that the world needs your book. Um, there is a certain amount of labor and unrewarded labor that goes into writing a book. You can be writing literally for months, for years, and never see anything. And you've got to feel like this book is important. And if it's not perfect, if you have grammatical errors, that can be fixed. But you have to believe that your book is important. There's somebody out there will read your book. There's nothing better than the first time somebody who you don't know tells you, "Hey, this was really good," and this is like, wow, that would be the first thing. I mean, and I say that because without that, everything else is just going to be like, yeah, I'll get to it. But you've got to kind of commit to the fact that you're going to have to spend some money. You're going to have to either spend money or time, and more likely you have to spend both. If you've got a lot of money, then you can hire people to do all these things for you. If you don't have a lot of money, you're going to have to do some of this stuff yourself. But you're going to have to spend money. You're going to have to edit. You're going to have to get a professionally made cover. You're going to have to go into Facebook or go into Amazon, whatever media you choose to use as your advertising platform. And I don't like that. That's not me. You've got to do it. I mean, you can have the greatest book in the world, but if no one knows about it, it doesn't make any difference. You're gonna have to. I know a lot of writers tend to be what they call introverts. You got to get out of that. You got to talk in front of people. Any chance you get to talk about your book, shake somebody's hand and talk about the book, you got to take it. I think that's the most important thing. And you got to read. You got to keep up with your genre, keep up with other people writing, because things change, and things change. It could change with a book. If a book, the Harry Potter series has really changed the way how people approach it. Now everybody wants to write about these teen wizards and everything, but you've got to stay with it. You can't be locked in your book. I've had to go back and rewrite every one of my books to some degree, and it's not fun, but you got to do it. This is kind of like a job, and you work for yourself, and you got to kind of be in the position of, would I fire me? And if I would, you need to work harder. So it's definitely a labor of love, and it's great, it's fun. I mean, the creation process for me, I love it. But this marketing stuff, man, I hate it like taxes, but I gotta do it, and that's if you're out there on that fence and it's like, you got to embrace the suck, man. I mean, it's you've got to work in that space to get your book noticed.
Your book is a product. That's
It's
what it comes
exactly, it's a
down
product.
to.
It's a product, and I think of it as a three-stage product. There's process, there's product, perfection, and presentation. The product is the book, and you finish the book, you write the end, and then you go back and rewrite it, you edit it, you hire people. Then the next part is the perfection, and that's some of that editing, but also hiring that guy to make your new cover for you. Maybe you got to change your format internally. And finally, his presentation. That's what people have to see. Are you on Amazon? Are you on some of these other platforms? If you're not, you're probably not going to get the looks you are. Can you survive without being on Amazon? Absolutely. But it's the big dog, and you're going to have to deal with that one way or the other.
Yes, it is. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we finish up?
Just that, I hope this has tickled your fancy and your interest, and I hope your viewers uh, jump onto the blog there that I have on your website and take a look at the first chapter. And if that does interest you, go ahead and check out James H. Roby, ROBY.com, and join my mailing list and find out what's going on the next adventures of the Urban Knights.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, James, for being here with us.
And Debbie, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to talk to people in the literary world and people who are helping independent writers get out there and get their voices heard.
Well, thank you. And it was great talking to you and great meeting you. Keep on keeping on.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'll also throw in a quick plug for my own latest book. It's called Damaged Goods, and it kicks off a new series with a female Marine veteran protagonist, Erica Jensen. I'm in the midst of wrapping up the first clean draft of my second novel in that series, so that's good. And anyway, you can buy the book at any online retailer or directly from me. Just go to my website, debbiemack.com, where you can find my books as well as my Patreon page for this podcast. Just look for the Patreon button that says support me on Patreon or support us on Patreon and get the perks available for patrons for as little as $1 a month.
Wow.
Thank you for listening, everyone. Our next guest in 2 weeks will be Troy Lambert. And until then, happy reading.